Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hopefully, this is a good start for a series of sessions on working with SketchUp to design a project. So, as you can see by the title of my presentation here, Digital Design for Woodworking. And that's the primary thing. And I'm going to basically be talking about using SketchUp. There are other applications out there, but I'm concentrating on SketchUp. And before I get really into this, I'm going to shut off my camera so you don't have to look at my face. Let's see, there's that button. All right. So let's get into this. So why 3D digital design? If you're doing your design work on paper, pencil and paper, ink and paper, don't quit. It's a great way to get started with a design. But the beauty of using digital application, such as SketchUp, or there are others, Fusion 360 is a real popular one these days, is that you can work in 3D, so you can look at your project from different directions. It's the same project. And if you were doing 2D drawings, for example, just elevations, let's say, in a plan view, that can work, but it's easy to get things that don't agree. And it can be difficult to see that they don't agree until after you've made your model three-dimensional and or built your project. And so that's a really nice reason for doing the digital 3D design, is that you get to look at it in 3 dimensions. It also helps you sort out construction details. How do you want to do your joinery? What I find very often is I'm thinking about the process as that I'll build a piece in as I'm modeling it. So I have some idea of what I need to do when I get to the shop and what order I need to make parts, or what order the operations need to be to actually make the part. Typically, 3D digital design, you can look at your model in perspective view, which is the way we see, and it is something that pretty much anybody can understand when they look at it. And the last thing that I wanted to point out here is that you can get data such as a cut list, CAD files for going to CNC or 3D printing or whatever you need out of that file. And you don't have to know as much to actually create the model as you might if you were working on paper. So what is SketchUp? SketchUp's primarily a 3D modeling application. It was originally designed as a visualization tool for architects. And in fact, the original developer was an architect who wanted a simple digital version of sketching on a napkin. So he could sit down with a client and talk about a design. They could have their input. He could do sketches and things like that. And in the early days, the intent was then the sketch that the architect made would get handed off to the draftspeople to do the CAD work for all the construction documentation and all of that stuff. And now you can actually get all the construction documentation and everything right out of SketchUp. You don't need a different application for all of that. So, and in the process, it also has evolved into being a perfect tool for woodworkers. I found SketchUp back in 2022, and I used it for, I realized that it was going to be a perfect thing for my woodworking projects. I could design the piece, look at it, make sure everything was what I wanted, get the information I needed out of it to go out to the shop and build it. And when I actually built it, it was like building it for the second or maybe the third time. So that was pretty neat. Why SketchUp? I found it to be more intuitive than just about anything else out there. And you start with a small set of tools. They're very powerful. And it's designed intentionally to be a fairly lightweight program. Again, the tools are there. I think of it as sort of a basic woodworking shop. You might not need all of the tools that somebody else needs. I don't know how, but I've managed for a long, long time without a lathe, for example, in my shop. That might change here, but, and I know that's kind of a slippery slope. But the nice thing with SketchUp is that you can add tools if you need them, but you may find you don't need them. Again, you can create perspective views that anyone can understand, and there's many ways to use the resulting models. I'll show a few examples of things I've done in a little bit here. Actually, there's a couple of pieces that I've modeled and these were based on photographs, and they're all fully detailed with joinery and all of that business. We'll get into that more later. Here are some links for SketchUp resources. I'll bring this up again at the end so that you can scan these again if you want. But the first link on the top left, it will take you to the SketchUp site where you can get SketchUp. They offer some free e-learning resources, and they have a series on YouTube called Square One, which goes over all of the basic tools and shows in depth how each tool works. And I would highly recommend that if you're getting into SketchUp as a new user. Actually, even if you've been using it, you might find something useful there. The same with their e-learning resources. I added a link here for the system requirements. And I did a course for fine woodworking called SketchUp for Furniture Design that it's designed with 5 or 6 sections, or what they called milestones, and going through modeling a piece of furniture and creating a plan from it, which maybe you find that interesting. It'll be a little more involved than I can do in these sessions, but something to maybe take advantage of. Just a quick thing here. This is current as of today. There's 3 different subscription levels, and just thought I'd present that as just so you know what you're getting into. Those are the Go shown on the left is a web-based and iPad only system or application. There's Pro and Studio, which include the desktop version, which is what I'll be using when I'm demonstrating. And they include a lot more capability. And then there is a free version for hobbyist use. If you're doing your woodworking and using SketchUp for money for clients, you do need to be using one of those 3 paid subscriptions. The free version is not authorized, or that's not allowed with that version. The free version is very good for basic stuff, but it is also quite limited. And so just so you know, going in there. So what do you need to use SketchUp? With the desktop version, which I'm going to be showing, I'll be showing it on Windows, but where applicable, I'll mention differences that relate to using a Mac. And basically, you need a reasonably current version of the Mac OS or Windows 10 or 11. A basic 3D button mouse works perfectly well. 3-button, that means a button under the center mouse wheel. And that the center mouse wheel is used, and the button under it are used for navigating in the 3-dimensional space. I'll show that next week when we get into the SketchUp interface. And you need a decent graphics card, especially if your models get more complex. The SketchUp for web, whether it's SketchUp Go or the free version, runs in a web browser. You do need an internet connection, and again, a basic 3-button mouse. SketchUp for iPad, a reasonably current iPad. Mine is 3 years old, and it will run SketchUp just fine. And an Apple Pencil. Actually, I have had some success using a Logitech 3-button mouse with my iPad. It's pretty good, not too flaky, so you could go with that. So here are some examples of some models that I've done. These were all done for other people, and the grill canopy and the chart cases on the left and the table with the drop-down leaf, those were all ideas that I did as sort of, somebody on a woodworking forum was asking for some idea for something, so I drew those up. The workbench on the top right is called a coffin maker's bench, and seems like kind of a nice idea. You don't have a huge top, but you can use it for planing and other things. The face vise comes off, and you can use hold fasts on the front or on the top. The stand-up desk on the lower right I designed for a woodworker in North Carolina who built that for one of his clients. The lowboy and the workbench here were done for Fine Woodworking magazine for plans, which they sell. And the little chair on the top of the bench and the stool were just things I did for fun. The red stool was modeled off of one that my grandfather had in his shop, and I now have. These again are things that I modeled for out of the interest of modeling them. The jig at the upper right was done for somebody who was looking for a way to safely rip thin strips to use as staves for making small diameter, long something. I don't even remember what it was. They wanted to be able to cut the bevels, and so I designed that jig for the table saw so that they could do that. SketchUp and other 3D modeling applications are great for being able to work through and iterate through designs. And so, for example, the 3 pieces across the top, you can see the legs on the 2, on the one on the left and the center one. It's the same legs there, and just different door and drawer design. And then on the right, I changed out the base. And so without having to redraw the entire model, I could make very simple changes to the model. The chairs with the orange seat at the lower left, the original one is the low-backed one, and I was curious what it would look like. It's supposed to be used more like a stool, and I thought it'd be interesting to see what it would look like with a taller back, a little bit more like a dining chair. And the table in the middle, the original table is the tall one, and I thought a coffee table could be interesting. So after modeling the tall one, I made a copy of it and converted it into the coffee table. On the right is a bed. The one on the right in this image is the queen size, the original, and I did a king size version of it for somebody who was looking for that. The queen size green and green inspired bed is available. There's plans available for that from Fine Woodworking. Working out details for things like this vise was done for another woodworker in North Carolina, and for plans for him to, I don't know whether he's selling them or giving them away, but this is for a Moxon style vise to clamp onto a bench, and being able to pull things apart and look at details is really a handy thing about working digitally. This would have been a very tedious and difficult thing to get right if I'd been doing it on paper. Another example of this is a simple plan that I did. In fact, actually, I did this as a plan for a woodworkers guild in Kansas. They were going to the Kansas State Fair, and they were going to have a booth there, and they wanted to be able to get people who were just coming by, maybe who had no experience with woodworking, to do something. So they created these, they had the idea of this peg puzzle. They created the triangular blanks, and then this fixture, I designed this so that they could have basically anyone drill the holes and get them all properly spaced. And so the triangular piece with all the holes on the right here slides around on some ball bearings that are attached to the baseboard, and the drill, the user just slides it around till this thing settles down onto the ball bearings, and then they pull the drill bit down into the wood and then move it around, and they just keep going till they run out of holes. And the guild folks told me that they went through about 100 blanks, and they had people from the age of 6 up to about 95 that came and did this thing. So it's kind of a neat deal. This is a plan that I did for Fine Woodworking magazine a couple of years ago, and this shows a cut list that was generated out of the SketchUp model. And there's another page from that plan showing the details. This kind of detail work and the dimensioning and all of that stuff is pretty straightforward once you get the model built. And these were done in an accompanying application called Layout. That goes with SketchUp for desktop. Not all plans have to be all that complicated, though. This is a plan that I did for a project that I was building. It's a ski rack for my wife, and I had an odd length backboard for this thing, and I knew what I needed for the spacing on the arms. And I also knew where I had to hit a couple of studs with lag screws to put this thing up. And I could have done all the math on paper, but I had to come in the house anyway to get a pot of coffee going. And so while it was running, I did this model, and then I used the dimension tool out of SketchUp to record the dimensions that you see over on the right. And there's the resulting ski rack. So pretty basic, but it got the job done, and it took me less time than it took me to actually make the pot of coffee. So there are other things that you can do with SketchUp. For example, import images and use them in what's called match photo. So for example, on the left here, I was working with an Eagle Scout. This was his project to build these planters that were going to go on the end of this building. And he needed to be able to present to the owners of the building and to some other people what he was planning to do. So we worked on the model for the planters, and then I added them to the photograph in SketchUp. And on the right, there's a building at our church, and they were talking about adding a sort of a vestibule over the front door, and because otherwise the wind and the snow and the rain blow in there when people go in and out. So I went out and took a photograph of the building and then used the match photo again to be able to add in the model. And you can also get terrain information and overhead imagery so on the bottom here, I've put a shed in behind my brother's house, and I didn't bother to model the house. Did this for him to show him how it might look if it was positioned there. But the elevations are there, and I've added in yellow the contour lines. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get stuff to start from and to work. So coming up on the 11th, next Wednesday, we're going to do the first session. We'll get into building a model. I'll go through the user interface a bit and show you the 3D space and that sort of thing. In the meantime, if you're interested in getting SketchUp and you don't already have it, I'll suggest that you go to SketchUp. Here's those links again, and get SketchUp downloaded. They do have a 7-day trial. If you've never used SketchUp before, you can get a 7-day trial of the desktop version. And I would recommend that you take a look at at least the Square One videos to get a kind of a flavor of the basics of the tools. In this session, these 3 sessions, I'm not going to really do a model with me sort of a thing. Although I did do that in the SketchUp for furniture design. It's sort of designed in segments, so you watch a video and then watch a video and do stuff. But that's again a longer program than we're going to do here. But we'll get into modeling a little shaker table with a drawer. I'll show you how to add the details like dovetails for the drawers, the drawer, only one drawer, and the mortise and tenon joinery and that kind of stuff. And so I hope you'll join me next week. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are, and have a good evening.